What the hell is life coaching? I mean, really, what is life coaching? And how is it different than executive coaching or even therapy? And isn't all of this really expensive? Is any of it covered by my primary health insurance? Hey, everybody, welcome to Let's Fix Work. I'm Laurie Rudiman. On today's show, I talked to Ben Brooks. He's a former business executive who did a turn in human resources. That's where I met him, but HR was only a slight storyline in his amazing career. Ben is now an entrepreneur and founder of a company called Pilot. It's an innovative career startup. They're democratizing executive coaching and helping people take command of their careers. On today's show, Ben and I talk about how you can take command of your career. We also answer questions about coaching, what it is, and why it's important. And finally, we talk about how you can fix work by being a better advocate for yourself. You don't have to hire a life coach for that. So sit tight, everybody, and we'll be right back with Ben Brooks.
Work is broken. So is the way you think about it. Host Laurie Rudiman is breaking things down so you can put them back together and make work something you can enjoy. Let's fix work together. With the Let's Fix Work podcast, here's Laurie.
Hey, everybody. It's Laurie Rudiman here, and today I'm here with my dear friend, Ben Brooks. Ben, how you doing?
I am having a super Saturday speaking with you.
I'm glad you're here. So why don't you tell us where you're based and what the weather is like? Because we're all having these hellish winters. And so tell us about your winter of discontent.
My winter discontent and disconnect, frankly, has been in New York City, where I live. I live in Manhattan. I'm between 9th and 10th Avenue, so I'm near the Hudson River. So I get a nice chill that blows down from upstate on the water. But it is a lovely Saturday here, and the sun is out, and I've got a cute new Lululemon look that I was sporting and some new sunglasses. So for my morning coffee run, I was feeling the flow with the weather, and I'm living into a summer that is going to be spring-like through maybe late July.
Yeah, that's well said. Well, I met you through the world of human resources. And when I think about you and the point in which I met you, you were like the guy in HR. You seem to have it all, but you're not doing that anymore. And it seems like you've disrupted your life and reinvented yourself. And I know you've started a business that you're incredibly passionate about. So who is Ben Brooks today?
Well, Ben Brooks today is like a 7-layer bean dip and just keeps adding another layer to it, Hopefully they're cohesive, right? It's not going from like carrots to something weird, But nonetheless, I remember it was such a meaty decision to go into HR, and I thought I was sort of deciding for the rest of my career. And I remember the head of HR who I'd worked with on a rotation said, if you decide to, move into HR for your career. And it was so funny that I went into HR, and then 5 years later, I was not in HR. I thought I was walking down a very long hallway, and it turned out to be just a short corridor. And now I'm an entrepreneur, and I have 2 businesses, and I left the corporate world sort of unexpectedly, and I'm happy to talk more about that. But I left thinking I was going to be the head of HR at a mid-sized company, and sort of like I stepped on a banana peel, and I was an entrepreneur one day.
Yeah. Wait. Why did you leave corporate America? Tell us more about that.
Well, we had I had worked for a CEO and a head of HR at a division of a large global firm, and then we did a bunch of work, and then they both got promoted to run the parent company. And there was some consideration of if I kind of went with them or not, and I stayed. And the new crew and I didn't get along as well. We still connected and talk to this day, but they just weren't up for the sort of like, let's innovate, let's change, let's make things better, let's work aggressively. And so it just was sort of an arranged marriage that didn't work out. Yeah. And I just at one point said, hey, I don't know if this is what I want to do with my talents and where I'm at with my career. And so it was interesting. The head of HR at the parent company who I'd worked with, incidentally also named Laurie, another great woman, she said, she's like, it sounds odd being the person responsible for talent at this company of 55,000 people, but I think you've outgrown this company. And I think that you should put your talents in. She's like, if you want to work here, you can work here for the rest of your career. But I think as your friend, I'm telling you, I think you've outgrown it. And so, I made the decision to leave.
That sounds like a gift right there. Like
huge
somebody
gift.
who was honest with you and gave you awesome feedback. And you didn't leave burning down a bridge,
Nope.
right? You didn't light your career on fire.
Nope.
You left with dignity and respect. And so did you become an entrepreneur right after that, or did you go wander like Moses out in the desert?
So I gave myself a little time. It was funny. A woman I'd worked with who we never got along super well, but we always were collegial and professional. It was like my second to last day, and I was kind of making some phone calls and things. And I called her, and she said, "Can I give you some advice?" And I was surprised. I said, "Sure." And she said, "Take your time, enjoy this, learn. Like this is like if you look back at your career when you retire, you're gonna have very few times where you had sort of a break." And do so. I listen to sometimes. Wise messages come from unexpected messengers.
That's right. That's right. That is such sage advice. How many people freak out and run to the next thing, or just don't know what to do with themselves in the downtime and fill it with stupid, useless tasks, right? So you
Totally.
took your time, and what did that look like?
I got sinus surgery and I installed a wireless printer inside of a cabinet in my kitchen. So in Manhattan, I have a printer now, which is a big thing if you
That
live in
is
in the
cool.
city.
Yeah.
And I got my apartment, decorated by a designer, and I did all these things. And it was interesting. I went to this executive education course in DC, and it was with a company that wanted me to potentially be one of their instructors and travel the world working with companies. And I had brought them into my previous employer, and I knew them quite well, and I traveled with them some before. And they put a name tag on me that said Ben Brooks Entrepreneur. And I said, "I'm actually unemployed. I'm not an entrepreneur. So can we get a new name tag cut?" And they said, "Well, you're in a group of entrepreneurs within this larger 100-person, 5-day seminar." And I was like, "Well, I'm not an entrepreneur. I've never wanted to be an entrepreneur. Never thought of myself. I wanted to be in my past a game show host or an airline CEO or a journalist or a politician. Never an entrepreneur." And so by the end of that week, that was like my tribe. Those were my people. And they were all from very different walks of life and backgrounds and parts of the world. And I remember driving home from DC and thinking, gosh, I'm at a fork in the road. I could be an entrepreneur or I could be an employee. And the things I would need to be to be successful on either one of those paths are almost entirely different.
Yeah,
so I need to decide which path. And the thing is, most people, when they think they're like, "Oh, you quit your corporate job to start a business and you knew what your business idea was." I was like, not at all. I had to essentially kind of like leave that for a clearing to emerge for me to figure those things out. And my friends, and I have a lot of friends who are 10 or 15 years older than me, said, some of them entrepreneurs, they said, "Just listen to the market. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, just listen to people's complaints and solve their problems and charge them money." And so that's what I started to do. And it was I decided to take on the identity of an entrepreneur without a business plan or a business idea. And I gave myself 2 years from April of 2013. I said, I'd give myself 2 years and I've got enough money in the bank, and I'll check it out. But I was very fearful. And I think some of the emotions that everyone else comes up and wastes their time or does stupid things. I had some of that too.
Yeah.
And I wrote a list of people I could beg for a job. And I literally said, like, people I could beg for a job. And it was in my Apple notes. And it was just so interesting. Like, I almost thought of myself in this very small way, and in a way where I'd be lucky to have a job. Yet I was a complete all-star, and I worked my ass off since I was like 12, and I'm bright. But for some reason, my confidence, absent a business card and a senior vice president title and a Fortune 250 brand, I was kind of like, well, who am I? How do I introduce myself? And so I think my identity was really attacked, but I was given identity by something outside of myself. And I think what I found one of the most empowering things as an entrepreneur is to give myself identity from the inside out that no one can take away.
It's so interesting to me that you said you became an entrepreneur without a business plan, because that, I think, is a common story that we don't talk enough about. How many people just kind of start at one thing and then pivot and go along, and their entrepreneurial journey starts out like kind of like a creek that has no clear path, and then it becomes a river, right? If they're lucky.
Yep.
So what are you doing now? I mean, you started out with no business plan. Where did you go? Where did it emerge?
Well, what I found out about business plans, and I was a management consultant, and I've went to business school, and I'm very business savvy, but nonetheless, business plans are good for one thing, which is to get financing. Because bankers or investors like venture capitalists or private equity funds, if you're a larger company, they want to see a plan to decide if they should give you money to invest in your business. So if you're not raising outside capital, a business plan is generally not useful. And whatever you put in the business plan is like a wild ass guess, right?
Yeah.
So I think your creek analogy is very well made, right? And that's And that was my entrepreneurial journey is just a continuation of the crick that was my career, right? Ben's Crick. It's like a show. It's going to come back,
Yeah, I love it. It sounds like something from the 70s, doesn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. And I've got an acoustic guitar and,
man, it's jangly. Absolutely. Yes.
And so I think my career was always zigging and zagging and emerging and flowing and drying up a little bit and going over a dam and all that. And the entrepreneurial journey went that way as well. And I started with advising small business owners on growing their companies. The Bains, the McKinseys, the Oliver Wyman, the BCGs of the world do a great job of advising big companies. But for small to mid-sized companies, there's very little advice. And if there is, it's always super niche. It's not even that you're an HR advisor. You're an incentive comp specialist. And what people actually need is someone that can talk to them about everything, about pricing and sales and people and legal and technology and their leadership and their spouse and everything.
But, there's this myth out there that you have to get super, super small in order to make a ton of money, right? I mean, that's the lesson that we hear. So people don't even value generalist advice, even if it's good generalist business advice. Is that a myth, though? Because clearly you're doing something right with your fluency in a lot of different areas of business.
Yeah, I remember I read Daniel Pink had a book maybe a decade ago called A Whole New Mind, and it was about how right-brainers will rule the future. And he talked about the information economy being about depth. Right. And that, and I remember even meeting an eye doctor once, and he wasn't a cornea guy. He was a retina guy, and he couldn't speak to the cornea because that was outside of his area. And I'm like, it's a freaking eye. Right.
Yeah.
And the point is with the internet, depth can be done in India. Right. Because it's very, focused and things. And so depth got commoditized because it's like you can access it, you can find it, it's a thing. And what he talked about in that book was that you really want to think of yourself as a conductor. It's not about playing the flute or the oboe or the cello. It's about having an appreciation for all those and bringing it all together. And so I never use the G word. I never call myself sort of a generalist, right? But I think of myself as a broad-based thinker, right? And I have an experience around a lot of different topics. I have a rich collection. I have very different language. I think, again, generalist implies sort of just this average mediocrity around things.
You're a dilettante. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so what I say is, people don't need the world's leading expert at HR when they have a company of 35 people. They need someone that knows marginally more than they do.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. So you've been on this journey, and you said you're the owner and founder of 2 businesses. So tell us a little bit about those businesses.
Visionary voices, bold breakthroughs. This is Shally's Alley, where top recruiting minds spill their best-kept secrets live every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Raw, unfiltered conversations on sourcing, hiring, and the future of talent, where we ask the tough questions no one else will. Tune in and level up.
So the first one is a business and executive coaching practice. And I've worked with people from nonprofits. I've worked with hedge funds. I've worked with people in real estate. I work with a dog genetics company that's doubling the life expectancy of dogs. Cats might be next,
Yeah, I hope so. Although they live forever already. Anyway.
They are. Yeah, they're doing okay.
Yeah, They do fine. Yeah.
And that's been really fun. But what I realized, about 2 years in, I was talking with a friend of mine, and I don't know if you're a points or miles collector or hoarder with credit cards.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
why else have a credit card, right?
Exactly. So my friend Brian is the points guy. He runs this blog called.
Yeah, that's a great website. Yeah.
So Brian we were having, I went on a trip with him, and I was in his car, and he's like, well, Ben, like this coaching thing is great. And I had a sold out practice almost. And he's like, but what's the big idea here? What's the points guy of careers? What's the thing, And we kind of were like, yeah, everyone's sort of like a mess about their careers. And we know all these people, and they're at, Skadden, one of the top law firms in the city, or they're at Goldman Sachs, or they're here, they're Ogilvy and Mayer. They're all these great companies, but they were like frustrated or stuck or confused or downtrodden or just kind of headless, jumping between companies. And so I thought of the idea of like, how do we give coaching to more people? And the big problem I found with coaching is the median cost of a coach, executive coach, according to Harvard Business School, is about $500 an hour. In New York, it's more than that. And it's also done during high opportunity cost time, 9 to 5, while you're at work, when you should be selling or delivering or leading or marketing or coding or financing. So we wanted to democratize coaching and give it to more people and give it to them sooner in their career. Give it to people that are part of the 98% of people that never get executive coaching, level the playing field for people that are first gen. They don't have, some people have a father in Greenwich, Connecticut, who's 3rd generation partner at a law firm and can advise you as their kid about how to deal with your boss. But a lot of people don't.
No,
right?
More often than not, they don't. I think about my own parents' journey, and my mother has a GED and became a Chicago cop, and my father kind of fell into lifetime employment at the phone company with a high school degree. And
Wow.
they both really struggled throughout their own careers, right, to figure it out, to make sure they were on the right side of political issues. And then I think about my own journey, and there was no one for me, no one to model good behavior, and no one to tell me how to succeed in the corporate ranks. And so I really felt the absence of that throughout my career. So you democratize coaching. And so how do you actually do that though?
So I put my life savings into it because I believe in it so much. And Pilot is the name of the company. And the idea is, we want to make coaching this thing that's done in groups, right? Because we find that people have better outcomes if they're losing weight or they're saving money or they're raising money for charity. They always do better in groups. We take coaching.
Wait. They would do better with your coaching in a group, because I would think that that type of coaching is very vulnerable, right? And it's a very tender spot in our hearts to say our careers aren't going well, or they're not going in the direction we want, or we want them to be something different. So they're willing to come together in a group and do it.
So what's interesting is a lot of what they share is confidential, kind of one-on-one with our company or through our software, but they're going through the process together as a cohort or a group. So
Great.
There's kind of that kind of like we're all in this together, but we were having our own kind of private expressions of that.
Yeah.
And so they come together for group video coaching every 6 weeks or so. But then every other week they're not doing that. They're doing individual confidential, coaching assignments where they can kind of bare their soul or whatever. And we make sure that the group conversations are more around sort of positive things around the future or goals, rather than maybe something really personal or nubby that we less likely to talk about, openly. And I think the thing is that, like I work out with a personal trainer, or like I see my shrink every week as well. I meditate every day. And I have these various practices that work for me. And they're just sort of like built in, and they keep me sort of steady. They keep me getting better, right? There's someone else thinking about me and my life and my health and success.
Yeah.
And we wanted Pilot to be the same thing, that it's not a 3-day retreat, that you get a nice binder and you come back excited like you found religion. And then a month later, you're like kind of back to your old devices.
Right. That's just a serotonin spike. That's all that is. So you've democratized coaching. You're using a web-based or an app platform to deliver that, correct? Who's your buyer? Are individuals investing or are companies investing? How does that work?
So it's a great question. We started selling to consumers. So we thought, gosh, like be happier at work. And here's the super affordable coaching thing. And we ran into a wall on that. We hit 2% of our sales goal. And we basically found that people loved our product when we do all the testing, but they kept saying one sentence, and it was very, very consistent. They'd say, my company should pay for this.
Wow.
And we talked to a number of people that are mutual connections of ours, HR analysts and software folks, and they all said, yeah, like employee entitlement beyond undergrad or graduate school is really high, and it'll be 10 years before people start paying even nominal money for their own career advancement and development. So we were just too soon, and despite a lot of good efforts, so we switched to selling to companies. So now the company pays for it, and oftentimes so far for us, it's been people outside of HR actually buying it, that have said, hey, like, what HR does is okay, but like we want something else or something different. And they write the check in. We've got some people in HR also buying, saying, hey, this would be a wonderful complement to the other things that we're doing.
It's, I think, not necessarily a myth out there. It's more of a fact that most companies suck and would not make that kind of investment in their workforce. So what types of companies are saying yes to this? What types of leaders really think this is important for their employees?
I think ones that are thinking about their future. I think companies that are thinking about this quarter and their numbers are not doing this. And Pilot is very, very affordable. So it's less about the expense outlay, but it's like the willingness to, have that sort of responsibility. And we talk about employee responsibility, but also the company responsibility to support individual owned development. And that's kind of a macro trend, is individual owned, company supported professional development and growth. Yeah. And we're right in the center of that. And so it's varied. I mean, MetLife is our biggest customer. And you may not think of a older insurance company as, but they absolutely love our product. Their people love it, and we're working with a lot of high income earners, like mid-career people. We have one group that's all females, and it's a female sales professionals. And but we've got nonprofits. We've got Cadillac, Pandora Radio, Pinterest, some hospitals, and so it's been surprising. It's not necessarily oftentimes tech startups and HR tech in particular. But I guess this is true across all tech, will sell to other progressive tech companies. So you go and you say, okay, we're going to go do this. And so Pinterest would be a good example. And you just sell to a bunch of Pinterests, right? And a bunch of Silicon Valley sort of companies. But that has really not been where we've seen a lot of interest. It's companies that are much more established, that have tried a lot of other things, and often that have longer tenured employees, and they're thinking about that, and they kind of want to do more. And we always kind of use the analogy: if you got on British Airways and you flew to London, there's usually like international first class, and there's business, and there's coach. And pilot is sort of the upgrade to business. For a lot of people, you neglect and coach. You've got people in first. You probably have executive coaches for your C-suite, but there's like tons of people in coach you wish you could put in business class, and that's kind of where pilot sits.
Yeah, I think most of the people listening to this do sit in coach and would love to be upgraded to business class. So this is right in line. I remember back in the day when I worked in human resources, we would recommend executive coaches, and there was some credentialing involved, and there was actually some certification involved. Do you carry any of that personally? Do you have certification or credentialing, or is that overstated?
It's funny. So the National Career Development Association, I got certified in as a career coach with them, but I don't there's the International Coaches Federation that has like a bunch of organizations that they then accredit. But I didn't go through any coaching certification program. And it's interesting I thought I needed to do a lot more of that besides the Career Development Association. And in my sales process as a coach, I have been asked a sum total of one time from not just people that chose to do business with me, from anyone that considered doing business with me. If I had a coaching certification, I've also been asked one time by a different person if I had an MBA, and it was much more about like the referral. I think I did a good job with my website and telling my story and testimonials and my approach and all those sort of things. And I think that I'm very clear. People, it's like, hey, no, I'm not going to, some people that have a certification will have a binder and say, here's a 12-step process to coaching, and we're going to put you on the process. And I look at it in a much more sort of bespoke way.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But I think there are programs. There's one called Accomplishment Coaching that's excellent, and it's like a year-long thing. And multiple of my friends have gone through it and got a ton out of it. So I refer people there. And there's one at Columbia Business School and NYU here in New York that are both very good. So I've referred multiple. So I think for the right person in particular, if they've never had a coach of their own, if they've never been in HR, if they but I had my own executive coach in my 20s, and my company had paid for it. It was a remarkable thing. So. And I've just done a lot of work on myself, but I think if people are kind of just wading into it and don't even know, those programs can be extremely helpful.
So when we come back, we're going to talk about why people get frustrated at work and quit to start their own thing, and then ultimately fail. And then we're going to talk about different theories about fixing work. And then finally, I know you've got some messages related to careers rooted in accountability and systems and how to fix work. So we're going to talk about all that when we come back with Ben Brooks. So everybody sit tight. We'll be right back after the break.
Hey, are you ready to podcast like a pro? Then you need a secret weapon, someone who can make it easy, where all you have to do is show up and be the host. At One Stone Creative, that's what we do. Everything. Yeah, everything. Imagine, every time you sit down to record, you know what your topic is. You want a script? We can do that too. Then you record it, drop it in a folder, and that's it. Our team will take it from there. Production, show notes, uploads, blog posts, social media assets, swipe copy, like I said. Everything. Book a call with the podcast strategist today. Just go to onestonecreative.net/podcast. That's onestonecreative.net/podcast. And we'll take it from there.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm here today with Ben Brooks, my dear friend that I met in human resources, who's now a founder and a CEO. And I'll let him tell more about his story in a second. But first, Ben, I'm really curious. There are so many people out there who get frustrated by work, like me, like you potentially, and quit to start their own thing, and then they ultimately fail. So what's happening with these individuals? How can they set themselves up for success? And do they need a business coach? What's that all about?
Well, I think if you've been in a romantic relationship for a while, the idea of Tinder could be very alluring, where you could swipe and just find something amazing. And I think that the idea of hitting the F it button and leaving and burning it all down is enticing to people on their worst days. But very often people that leave don't understand what didn't work about work for them. And they had done little to try to address it. They hadn't done the marriage counseling equivalent in this analogy. And so they hadn't really taken up their agency and responsibility and figuring those things out and taking action and experimenting. And I love being an entrepreneur, but I will tell you, it's generally not a good idea.
Yeah.
Right? Going to the movies.
A lot of people. Yeah.
Going to the movies is a great idea. Going to the beach is a great idea. Like having, like, I don't know, having cocktail maybe could be a great idea.
Get a hobby. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But starting a business is generally not a good idea.
No,
And I think that I'd say probably, of the sort of like knowledge worker workforce, probably 98% of people should be employees.
yeah.
Right. Just,
So what surprises you about being an entrepreneur, both positively and negatively?
I think on the positive side, I've never felt smarter or more appreciated. People actually listen to me, and it's not relative to which function I'm in or who my boss is or what my title is or which previous company. Like, people listen and they take action. And, I suggest things and people launch products, or they fire people, or they acquire things, or they, change how they treat others. And that's been really positive. I think on the maybe challenging side is being an entrepreneur. I thought of, slide decks and, bookkeeping and lawyers, and like that's all like been fine. It's been the personal side that's been the hardest, because I am the engine, right? I'm the power plant of the business. And so if you thought about a power plant that has to generate every day, like I can't have a day where I'm generating at 30% or the plant's just kind of down because I'm in a bad mood, and I think early on I would have like a lot of inconsistency. It was sort of like, if you're like, certain developing countries, like, is the power going to be on today? That was a bit like my business. And then the results, the momentum, the money, right? The learning would be highly variable. And so I think I've had to learn a lot to steady myself, to manage my anxiety, to manage my insecurity and my fear, all those things.
Can you talk about that? Because I think that's so important. When I hear workers complain about their work-life balance, like actual employees, I think, what's it like to have PTO? Like, what's it like to have a vacation day that's paid for by someone else, right? So I don't have a lot of sympathy sometimes when people complain about work-life balance, but it sounds like you've done some good work as an entrepreneur to get your own work-life balance under control, because it can be insane. There's high rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide among founders and entrepreneurs. So how do you fight the battle to stay healthy?
I don't know about you, but I don't know very many people that are hopeful about the world of work. And I'd like to change that. My name's Marcus Mossberger, and I started the Hope at Work podcast, where you'll find two things. Number one, really interesting guests. And number two, innovative ideas about the future of work. Check it out.
I want to take a break real quick just to let you know about a new show we've just added to the network. Up Next at Work, hosted by Gene and Kata Keel of the Devon Group. Fantastic show. If you're looking for something that pushes the norm, pushes the boundaries, has some really spirited conversations, Google Up Next at Work, Gene and Kata Keel from the Devon Group.
Well, one of the mistakes I made early on was thinking in this delayed gratification sense that like I was going to get to some, utopia later of like, just I'm going to be rich and I'm going to have all these things taken care of and I'm going to have all this power and notoriety. And I will just suffer, very Catholic, like I will suffer now to get to the gates later, right? And that was a dumb way of thinking about it on my part. And what I sort of needed to reframe, and it took me honestly a couple years and a lot of work on myself at kind of the level of like soul, right? Was to find a way to make each week enjoyable, regardless of the conditions or circumstances. That like I needed to generate pleasure and satisfaction and learning and delight and connection every week along the way, even if it was an 80-hour week, even if things were kind of falling apart, even if there were challenges. And so I've started to delight in the process and the journey of where I am now, rather than think I should be somewhere that I'm not, because for so long I tortured myself comparing and FOMO and shame and being really bummed out, that things were going slower than I thought they should go. And now I'm now sort of being like, this is where we're supposed to be this week. Let me make the best of this and enjoy it, and also like move the business forward.
I think there's such good lessons in that for average workers, right? People who have normal jobs, because as you're sacrificing for your own business, some people sacrifice at that level for businesses where they don't own any equity, right? They're given 110% to the company and 2% to their spouses and 3% to their children. So what I hear in you is really about finding joy, finding some interesting things to do during the week, and really focusing on your own individual health. That is so hard for most Americans, Catholic or not. Do you have any insight into why that's so difficult for us to like be healthy as individuals? Why are we so fucking stressed out about work?
Well, I think one of the things that we found, we talked to some career science PhDs and a researcher in his 60s who studied careers. And the number one determinant of satisfaction in a career, according to this guy, was the degree to which people advocated for themselves. And so distinct from success, satisfaction. And we find that there are, in Pilot, we have a lot of women that use Pilot and absolutely love Pilot. But we find that women have much greater struggle in advocating for themselves, and tend to be, generally speaking, more other oriented. And so it's been they like Pilot because we interrupt the cycle and we say, hey, you need to focus on yourself. You need to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
And I read last week in the New York Times, I was on a business trip, and the chief science officer at Match.com, who's a female, does this research in the study. And this kind of displayed the point around advocacy perfectly. 90% of heterosexual men said that they would embrace a woman asking them on a date. 13% of heterosexual females felt comfortable doing so. And that's a form of self-advocacy as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. So I think about self-advocacy, and so many individuals who are often told in society they have no worth anyway are expected to come to work, right, and negotiate for themselves, be their own advocates. And I think women, people of color, members of the LGBT community worry about the narcissism we see in some of the majority groups or the dominant groups in companies. And we don't want to be like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want healthy narcissism. We don't want to be unchecked narcissists. So how do you encourage and enable people to become healthy narcissists, right? Because that's what it takes. It takes us having a healthy ego, right? Being our own best version of ourselves and being confident enough that we're bringing that to the workplace. So how do you do that?
Well, I think a lot of it's the golden rule. If the roles were reversed, how would you want someone advocating to you? Right. And that's kind of the fundamental thing we always start with coaching is like, how would you want someone to approach? So it's not a hostage situation. You're not bringing tons of emotion to it. If you can manage it yourself. I mean, the things that people don't advocate for sometimes are so simple, like a second monitor. You may have a sister who's got dialysis on Thursdays at 4:00 and core hours are 9 to 5. You just figure out your schedule and you make up the time you get home, or you come in an hour early. And it's often the smallest things that people don't think to ask. They say, gosh, I never get, invited to that meeting, but they never say that they want to be.
Yes,
right? People want to go to conferences and they never ask, or they never say which one they want. Like, everyone is in such a passive, and that's where we have this kind of, paternal relationship, with HR and management. And then here you are, this little employee, and you may make six figures, and you may have, be in an office and all this stuff. And yet you still show up and kind of act like a kid waiting to be told what you can and can't do and to be tapped.
Yeah, that learned helplessness is so real. I knew I was an entrepreneur when I finally got a chair that fit me. I'm 5 feet tall, and I worked for 12 years in corporate America with a chair that was always the wrong size. It did not match my body. And they were great Herman Miller chairs, right?
Sure.
But nobody thought to order the C or whatever version of it that was appropriate for little Laurie Rudiman. And I think now, how stupid is that, right? We focus on ergonomics and all sorts of other ways, but I didn't feel the agency to ask for a chair that fit me. That is really interesting.
And it's, one of my former colleagues is now the head of HR at the NBA. And I met with them a few months ago, and we were talking about talent and things like that. And he said, they had 5 people had resigned like in the last week or so. And they were all regrettable attrition, people that they didn't want to quit. And he sat down with all 5 of them, and not even a formal exit interview, but just to say, like, what's up? And they all resigned for reasons that the NBA could have addressed, and not a single one had spoken up to anyone at the NBA around their needs.
God,
and it wasn't title and pay, by the way, which is, that's the thing. The recruiting industrial complex has got everyone sort of bamboozled into that so they can make more money, right? And they really screw people on their careers, right? I don't
disagree with you at all. Absolutely. Yeah, because they make a certain percentage of whatever they place you for. So yeah,
totally.
They want you fighting for cash instead of other things that can make your life better. Absolutely. Although cash is still important. My God. I mean, how often do we not pay women and people of color and, people in all sorts of micro communities not the same amount that they deserve? But it's more than cash, right? What else is it? What
totally.
Do you find?
And it may be things that cash will come later if you have the conditions to be successful and engaged, right? You get to be on that special team. You get to work with this new group of clients. You get to help implement the system. You get to lead the presentation to the board, whatever those things that then are going to, those things will beget other responsibilities where cash will come. And I'm all about, like, ask for cash. Like, that's a great thing. But I think that oftentimes the agency is around other things that really impact our satisfaction.
Yeah, don't stop with the cash, right? Go beyond, I think, is the message here.
And if in the test for people, if you're wondering at home, gosh, am I advocating for myself a lot or enough? I would say, when's the last time you were told no? And how often are you told no? My guess is it was a long time ago and infrequently. And if you're not hearing no, you're not asking enough. Because if you think, oh, well, I advocate and I get what I want. Well, if you're not hearing no, you're not advocating enough, because you should be getting no's or counter proposals or later or criterion, if this, then that. And so most people just don't hear no, because again, that taps into rejection and fear and shame. So they avoid that.
I do have this theory about work that we fix work by fixing ourselves. And so often we bring our family of origin trauma to work. And so I think you're right. People avoid no because it taps into this, inner dialogue that they're having with themselves about stuff that happened when they were 5 years old. That's not happening in the present day. So it makes me wonder how some of the work that you're doing around meditation and mindfulness has really helped to center you individually and make you a better careerist, right? You're in the present today, aren't you? Or trying to be.
Yeah, I think any coach, if they're a credible and legitimate coach, and we have multiple coaches on the pilot team, should always be working on themselves and keeping themselves as an integrity to, kind of working on ourselves first before we work on others. There's a relatability. And I think part of it is just to be present, to think, sometimes even my calendar, it's like this weird game of Tetris. And I'm like, ooh, there's a spot. Let's fit something in there. Versus saying, do I want to go to that event? Do I want to speak to that person? Does this need to be a call? Do I want to be involved in this at all? And for so long, I was doing the should list was a mile long. I'm a big should'er. And so I think that was for me to kind of slow my roll and to stop and say, like, well, how do I feel about that? Do I want that? I mean, even, I got all caught up in the sort of HR conference scene, and there were some delightful, lovely people I met, but in general, I didn't enjoy it that much. And I started going like, well, I think I should and keep my contacts. I'm like, no, like that's not what, I have a limited amount of time on this earth. We will all die. I will die someday. I don't know when that is. I don't want to spend it doing things that I don't think are things that provide me joy or make me smarter or make me, in those regards. And so I stopped doing a lot of that and found different things.
Ben, one of the joys about being on the HR conference circuit is that I met a ton of really great people like you, and I met my friend Lars Schmidt, and I met my friend Tim Sackett, who's a previous guest on the show, by going out into the conference world. And I know you don't speak at HR conferences really anymore, but where do you speak, and where would you like to speak in the future?
Well, I got to, all the people you mentioned, I got to meet as well through that circuit and thought they were fantastic speakers. I've been wanting to speak more to share this message around commanding your career. And I've been speaking, whether it's with business schools, I've been speaking internally at companies at their own sales, leadership, or executive offsites and things like that. But I'd like to be speaking. I actually would like to be back to some HR conferences. And I would like to share this message because I think so much of what we're trying to do is to set up and enable HR professionals to be heroes in their companies and bridge the gap so employees can take up their responsibility rather than always pointing at HR to do something.
I can also see this message resonating at like project management conferences and sales leadership training, right? And sales kickoff meetings. And when they bring in a speaker for President's Club events, things like that. So I really see your message really permeating through a lot of different aspects of the organization. Have you had an event where you spoke that you just really enjoyed it? Like you loved the audience, you loved the people in attendance? Who was that and what was it like?
I just spoke to MetLife's National Sales Conference, and the whole thing is about growing yourself to grow your business, your top and bottom line of your book. And really the larger narrative is around that we can all act and think like entrepreneurs in our careers, that entrepreneurship isn't reserved for people like you or I that file corporate tax returns with our own entities, that anyone can act and think entrepreneurial. You don't need to quit your job to act and think like an entrepreneur. It's kind of available to all of us. And that is around taking responsibility, being flexible, learning, being bold, et cetera. So that was a great event because I love salespeople. MetLife is a fantastic, one of our biggest customers. They're fantastic. And it just, I worked with a speech coach and I've done a lot of speaking, but I took it to the next level. And I felt very proud of my storytelling and my vulnerability and all those things. And I want to be doing a lot more of that.
So if there's one message you want to leave with our listeners about their career, about agency, about their role within an organization, or even about entrepreneurship, what is that one message you'd like people to hear?
Well, Pilot, our slogan is command your career. And you think about, we use kind of aviation analogies. You think about the unfortunate, incident with Southwest Airlines, earlier, about the female pilot, one of the first fighter pilots in the Navy, by the way. Fantastic job. If you listen to the air traffic control recording, how cool and calm and professional. She saved probably a lot of lives that could have gone wrong very, very easily. You think about how cool and calm and collected and command she was of that aircraft. People need to be the same way about their careers. Situationally aware, take total responsibility, be decisive, be vocal, move things forward, patient, calm. And if you can do that and you can really command your career, you'll have a great career, no matter what industry and no matter what your ambition. You may not want to be a manager. It may not be about going up some sort of ladder. It may just be around certain boundaries or providing the best service for your clients or doing work that's extremely high quality you're really proud of. But if you can find out what commanding your career looks like and day to day advocate for yourself and be a stand-up, be responsible for making work both successful and satisfying on your terms, you'll have a great career.
Amazing stuff, Ben Brooks. This is why we're friends, and this is why I absolutely admire you. Good job, dude. Listen, if people want to learn more about the difference between executive coaching, life coaching, what you do at Pilot, anything about you at all, where can they find you?
So pilot.coach, COACH, is our website. You can chat on our website with our team. I share a lot on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn for sharing, and all my Instagram. I'm Ben Brooks NY on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. So add me on LinkedIn or follow me or reach out. There's a lot we can share.
I love it. Your Instagram account is a source of joy in my life. So I feel like I live vicariously through you. So thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. I'll be sharing more.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Ben, it was great to have you today, and we'll see you soon.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Hope you enjoyed my chat with Ben Brooks. He's actually Ben fucking Brooks. He's so awesome. And if you let him, he will change your life. So take advantage of this podcast. Make sure you connect with Ben on the web. He's now part of your network. And connect with me at L. Rudiman and Let's Fix Work. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave a review. Let's Fix Work is a production of One Stone Creative, and I get all the best advice from Audra Casino and Megan Doherty. I want to thank you for listening and sharing the show via iTunes and your favorite podcast player. That's all for now. We'll see you next time on Let's Fix Work.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Let's Fix Work. Wouldn't you love to get your hands on Laurie's no-holds-barred, honest HR handbook for employees and pros alike? Download it for free at laurierudiman.com/DIYHR.